For 17 nights, my sister-in-law slept between me and my husband. I thought she was unhinged. On night 17, a click in the dark told me the truth and it shattered everything I thought I knew. For 17 nights, my sister-in-law carried her pillow into my bedroom and climbed into the space between me and my husband. I want you to hold that sentence for a moment before I explain it, because I need you to understand what I thought it meant before I understood what it actually meant. I need you to feel the specific, infuriating wrongness of it, the way it scraped against every boundary I had, the way it made me lie rigid in the dark counting the minutes until morning. Because if you don't feel that first, you won't understand what it meant when the truth finally arrived. I thought she wanted my husband. I was wrong. I was so completely, catastrophically wrong that thinking about it now, sitting in the quiet of a house that is finally just mine again, with the windows open and no sound except the street outside, I feel something that isn't quite guilt and isn't quite grief, but contains both of them as ingredients. She wasn't sleeping between us to take something from me. She was sleeping between us because something was standing right outside her door. Let me start 6 weeks before night 17, because that's where the story actually begins. My name is Isabel Reyes. I'm 34. I've been married to Esteban for 6 years, and for 5.5 of those years, I would have told you, without hesitation, that he was a good man. Steady, charming in the way that people describe as warm rather than practiced. The kind of man who remembered your coffee order and fixed things around the house without being asked and made your mother like him within 20 minutes of their first meeting. I know how that sounds now. I know what it means when someone's warmth is that consistent and that well-aimed, but I didn't know it then. I want to be honest about that. My brother Tomas had married Lucia 8 months before they moved in with us. Tomas worked nights at a warehouse distribution center, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 4 nights a week. And Lucia was new to the city, between jobs, without the network you need to feel like somewhere is home. When they asked if they could stay with us while they saved for their own place, I said yes immediately. Lucia and I had always gotten along. She was quiet and observant in the way I've always responded to, the kind of person who notices things about you that you haven't said aloud. We had a 3-bedroom house. The third room was right across the hall from ours. It seemed simple. Nothing about it was simple. The first red flag came so softly that I almost missed it entirely. It was Lucia's 3rd day in the house. Esteban and I were having dinner, and she came down from the 3rd floor with a look on her face that I clocked and then immediately explained away. Not fear, exactly. Something more careful than fear. The expression of someone who has decided, in the moment between one floor and the next, to arrange their face into something neutral. Everything okay? I asked. Fine, she said. Just tired. Esteban smiled at her and asked what she thought of the neighborhood. She answered with 2 sentences and looked at her plate. I told myself it was adjustment. New city, new house, new routine. I told myself a lot of things in those first weeks. The first night she came to my room was a Thursday, 11 days after she and Tomas moved in. Tomas was at the warehouse. It was just after midnight. The knock was soft. 3 taps, the kind you use when you're not sure you should be knocking at all. I opened the door and found Lucia in the hallway with her pillow pressed against her chest, barefoot in the oversized t-shirt she slept in, with the expression of someone who has been lying awake working up to something. I can't sleep, she said. The house makes noises and I keep startling. Is it okay if I... She gestured vaguely at the room behind me. I looked at her. I thought, she's homesick. She's in a new place. This is what some people need. Of course, I said. She came in. She put her pillow in the center of the bed. She lay down between me and Esteban, who had barely stirred. I lay in the dark for a long time afterward, telling myself it was fine. It was one night. She was my brother's wife and she was unsettled. And this was what family did. By night 5, the explanations were running thinner. By night 8, I had no explanations left. I only had resentment, which is what we carry when we don't have answers. The resentment had its own escalation, which I want to document honestly because it's part of the story. Night 5, I told myself she'd stop on her own. She didn't. Night 6, I asked Esteban quietly in the morning whether we should say something. He shrugged. She's lonely. Tomas isn't here most nights. Let it go. Let it go. He said it the way he said most things. Warmly, easily, with the specific reasonableness that made disagreeing with him feel like being the unreasonable one. Night 8, I lay between Lucia and the wall. She had begun to position herself closer to Esteban's side, which I noticed and which fed a specific, ugly suspicion I wasn't proud of, and I stared at the ceiling until 3 a.m. with my jaw clenched. Night 10, I told Esteban directly, she has to stop. This is our room. This is our bed. He looked at me with patient eyes. She's your brother's wife. She's struggling. What do you want me to do? Throw her out? I want you to set a boundary, I said. I want you to say something. You're making this bigger than it is, he said. Night 12, I went to Lucia directly. I sat on the edge of the 3rd floor bed in the afternoon, while Tomas slept before his shift, and I said as gently as I could manage, Lucia, I need to understand what's happening. Why can't you sleep in here? She looked at me. Her mouth opened, then closed. I'll try harder, she said finally. I'm sorry. That night she knocked at 1 a.m. I let her in, not because I wanted to, because whatever was happening in her face when she stood at that door was something I didn't have the language for yet, and I didn't know what I'd be turning away if I said no. Night 14, I called my mother. I told her obliquely that I was having trouble with Lucia living with us. My mother asked if it was serious. I said I didn't know. She said, Mija, sometimes people go through things they can't explain while they're in them. Be patient. I hung up feeling worse than before. Night 15, I watched Esteban sleep beside Lucia and and noticed for the first time something I should have noticed earlier. His breathing. It was too measured, too even. The specific quality of someone who is awake and has decided to perform sleep. I told myself I was being paranoid. Night 16. I almost asked Lucia to leave. I sat in the kitchen at midnight waiting for the knock, rehearsing the conversation, trying to find a version of it that was firm without being cruel. She knocked. I stood up. I went to the door. She was shaking. Not visibly, not dramatically. The shaking was in her hands, a small, involuntary tremor in the fingers gripping her pillow. Her eyes were very wide in the way that eyes go wide when adrenaline has been the dominant experience for long enough that it starts to show in the face. I didn't ask her to leave. I stood back. She came in. I lay in the dark, unable to sleep, going over and over the question I couldn't answer. What is she afraid of? Night 17. I had fallen into something between sleep and not sleep. That shallow, unsatisfying half-consciousness that your body accepts when full rest isn't possible. When I heard it. Click. One sound. Mechanical, precise, coming from just outside the bedroom door. My body understood it before my brain did. Every muscle went rigid at once. The way your body responds to a threat that registers below the level of thought. Then the light. A thin blade of white under the doorframe. Bright. Moving. Angling slowly upward, like something searching. Lucia's hand found mine under the blanket, in the dark, without fumbling, as if she'd been awake and waiting and knew exactly where my hand was. She squeezed once. Hard. Don't move. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I lay there with my heart hammering so loud I was certain it could be heard from the hallway, and I watched Lucia slowly, carefully lift her head from the pillow and position it in the beam's path, blocking whatever was on the other side from seeing clearly into the room. The light held for 2 seconds. Then it went out. Footsteps in the hallway. Not hurried, controlled, moving away from the door toward the stairs. Deliberate, retreating. I lay there for a long time after the sound disappeared, cataloging the things I knew. The sound of the click. A flashlight or a phone. Something with a focused beam. Someone standing at our door in the middle of the night and shining a light underneath it. Someone who had done this before. Who had a practiced, deliberate way of doing it. Beside Lucia, Esteban's breathing was slow and even. Asleep, still, completely, undisturbed. I thought about that breathing. About how long I'd been hearing it. About night 15, when I'd noticed it was too measured, and had told myself I was being paranoid. I was not being paranoid. I waited until Lucia's hand loosened its grip on mine, until the room had been quiet for 20 minutes, and then I turned my head and I looked at her in the dark. She was already looking at me. Her eyes said, "I know. The roof," she whispered. In the morning. At 1:30 in the morning, too wired to sleep, I followed Lucia up the narrow staircase to the flat section of our roof where we sometimes dried laundry. The city was dim and distant. She sat with her bare feet on the concrete and stared at them for a long moment before she started talking. I want to tell you what she told me, and I want to tell it carefully because it belongs to her, and she gave it to me in trust. It had started before they moved in. When Esteban would stop by their apartment, always helpful, always with a reason, stopping by to drop something off or fix something that Tomas had mentioned needing fixed, always when Tomas was working. At first it was subtle, the kind of subtle that is designed to be subtle, standing too close, finding reasons to be in whatever room she was in, comments that lived in the margin between harmless and not, about her hair, about her laugh, about the way she looked in a particular color, the specific kind of comment that a man can always claim was innocent if a woman is foolish enough to repeat it to someone. I told myself I was misreading it, she said. Her voice was flat in the way of someone who has rehearsed a story so many times that the emotion has worn off the surface of it and lives underneath now, deeper and more permanent. He was your husband. He was charming. Everyone liked him. Who was I? Then they moved in. The footsteps started in the first week. At night, on the 3rd floor, outside her door. The knob, turning slowly, she started locking it. The next morning at breakfast, Esteban had smiled and said old houses make strange noises. He looked right at me when he said it, Lucia said, and I understood that he was telling me, no one will believe you, that he'd already built the story. Old house, strange noises, nervous new wife in an unfamiliar city. My hands had gone cold. Why come to my room? I asked. Even as I asked it, I felt the answer arriving. Because he won't try anything with you there. Her voice broke on the last word. A single fracture, quickly controlled. I thought if I put myself where he couldn't reach me without going through you, without making himself visible, he would stop. She looked at her hands. And every night he stood at that door and checked. I sat with that. 17 nights of what I'd been reading as an inexplicable invasion was 17 nights of a woman using the only protection available to her in a house where the threat was the person I trusted most. We need proof, I said. My voice came out different than I expected, quieter, more certain. Something he can't smile his way out of. Lucia looked at me. I know where to start, she said. The next afternoon, Esteban's shower ran for 12 minutes. I had exactly 12 minutes. I had thought about this on the roof, where he kept things, where a second phone, the kind of phone you keep for a purpose you can't associate with your primary number, would be. Esteban's desk was in the small room off the kitchen that he used as a home office. I'd been in it hundreds of times. I knew the top drawer had the specific archaeology of a man who didn't organize. Old receipts, spare change, a broken watch, 3 pens that didn't work. I opened it. Under the receipts, under the loose hardware, was a black phone I had never seen before. No lock screen, no passcode. I opened it with hands that were entirely steady, which is a thing I've noticed about myself in moments of genuine crisis. My hands stop shaking and my thinking goes very clear, as though the body understands that this is not the time. The photo gallery opened. I won't describe everything I saw in detail. What I will tell you is enough. There were images of multiple women, pulled from social media accounts, cropped and saved with a focus and specificity that told a story about the person doing the saving. There were images of Lucia on our rooftop, shot through the third-floor window at an angle that confirmed planning and positioning without her knowledge. And there was a video, 3 seconds long, shot in darkness, a camera moving slowly toward a cracked door, holding at the threshold. The shower was still running. I opened my phone. I connected the two via Bluetooth file transfer, the same way I'd shared vacation photos with Tomas 100 times, and I transferred every relevant file in 2 minutes and 40 seconds. I put the black phone back exactly as I'd found it, the same position, the same orientation, receipts on top. I closed the drawer. I walked out of the office. I went to the kitchen and made tea. When Esteban came downstairs 10 minutes later, freshly showered, I handed him a cup and said the weather was supposed to be good this weekend. He smiled and said he'd heard the same thing. Sunday arrived with everyone home. I had spent Saturday night sitting with Lucia after Tomas came home from his shift, the three of us in the third-floor room with the door closed, talking through what was in my phone and what it meant and what we were going to do with it. Tomas listened with the focused, terrible silence of a man hearing something that is reorganizing everything he thought he knew about his life. He asked me twice if I was certain. I handed him the phone both times. On Sunday afternoon, when Esteban was in the living room watching television and Lucia was upstairs, I walked into the room where Tomas was sitting at the kitchen table, and I placed my phone in front of him without a word. I watched his face. Confusion first. Why was I handing him my phone? Why did I look the way I looked? Then he started scrolling and the confusion became something else. A careful, controlled progression through what he was seeing. The way you read something you need to fully understand before you react to it. When he reached the video, his thumb stopped. He sat completely still for 10 seconds. Whose phone? He said. He already knew. Esteban's. From upstairs, Lucia made a sound that I will never fully describe. Somewhere between a sob and relief. The sound of a weight that has been carried alone for months, finding other hands to hold it. Tomas set my phone down on the table with extraordinary care, the way you set down something that might break. Then he went upstairs. I heard his footsteps on the stairs. I heard the door. I heard his voice, which I couldn't make out clearly, but whose tone I understood. The tone of a man saying, "I'm sorry, I didn't know. I'm sorry, I didn't see. You are my family, and I failed to protect you." And I heard Lucia cry in the full, unguarded way that you only cry when you finally feel safe enough to. I stood in the kitchen, and I let them have that moment. Heavy footsteps on the stairs 10 minutes later. Esteban walked in, looked at the three of us, Lucia with Tomas's arm around her, my phone on the table, the specific atmosphere of a room that has already reached its verdict. And his face did something I recognized, with the sick clarity of hindsight, as the thing it always did when he needed to manage a situation. It went pleasant, smooth, arranged itself into the expression of a man who has nothing to hide and is mildly puzzled by the suggestion that he might. "What's going on?" he said. I picked up my phone and held the screen toward him. He looked at it for exactly long enough. Then he smiled. "Old work phone," he said. "Haven't touched it in years. Someone must have gotten into it." "Don't," Tomas said. One word, very quiet, the quietest I'd ever heard my brother's voice. Esteban turned to him, spread his hands open in the gesture of a man being falsely accused, wounded, baffled, generous in his patience. "Tomas, you know me. You honestly think I would ever—" My mother appeared in the kitchen doorway. She had been coming for lunch. Wrong timing, right outcome. She took in the room. Lucia against Tomas's side, his arm around her, my phone in my hand, Esteban with his hands spread wide in practiced innocence, and her face asked the question. I crossed the kitchen and I held the screen up to her face. She didn't want to look. I watched her decide not to. The small flinch of a woman who understands that once she sees something, she cannot unsee it. And then she looked anyway, because she is my mother, and she has never, in 62 years of life, chosen comfortable ignorance over difficult truth when the truth was about someone she loved. She looked. The hand that came up to cover her mouth was not a performance. I know my mother's performances. This was the real thing. The gesture of a woman absorbing something that has just rearranged the structure of her understanding. When her eyes came up from the screen, every trace of uncertainty was gone. Esteban began to say her name. "Stop calling me that," she said. Her voice was ice, complete, the voice of a woman who has closed a door and locked it. Tomas picked up his phone. He dialed. Esteban looked at me then, one last time, with the expression shifting underneath the charm into something colder and more honest than anything he'd shown me in 6 years. Not quite anger, calculation, assessment. The expression of someone determining what can still be salvaged. Nothing could be salvaged. He had nothing charming left to say. The responding officers were from the county sheriff's department. The first to arrive was Deputy Maria Santos, 9 years on the force, who took Lucia's initial statement in the third-floor bedroom with a thoroughness and care that told me she understood, from the first 5 minutes, what kind of case this was. The digital evidence, the files I had transferred from the black phone to mine, was reviewed by Detective Frank Osei of the County Criminal Investigations Unit, 23 years on the force, who specialized in technology-facilitated crimes. He took possession of both phones under a chain of custody protocol and explained to Tomas and me at the kitchen table that the metadata on the transferred files, timestamps, device identifiers, GPS data embedded in the image image files was intact and would be independently verifiable. The timestamps on the images and video match the dates your sister-in-law has documented in her account, he told us, looking at the notes he'd taken from Lucia's statement. That's significant. Our family attorney, Patricia Vega, JD, 18 years of family and criminal defense law in the county, who had handled my parents' estate matters for years and whom I called at 4:47 p.m. that Sunday, arrived within an hour and sat with Lucia through a second round of questioning, ensuring that Lucia's account was documented fully and with appropriate legal guidance. Patricia was the person who explained, clearly and without softening it, that what the evidence showed fell under multiple criminal statutes: voyeurism, stalking, criminal harassment. The pattern you've described, Patricia told Lucia, seated across from her at the kitchen table with her notepad open, the escalation from comments to physical proximity to nighttime intrusion, attempts to the recording. That's a documented behavioral pattern. The digital evidence supports every element of your account. Lucia sat with her hands flat on the table and listened with the careful, exhausted attention of someone who has been waiting a long time to be believed. Esteban was removed from the house that Sunday evening. A temporary protective order was filed by Patricia's office on Monday morning, covering both Lucia and me as named protected parties, and granted by Judge Carmen Delgado at the county courthouse by Tuesday afternoon. The criminal charges were filed in the third week: voyeurism, stalking, and criminal harassment. Detective Osei's forensic analysis of both phones, completed over 12 days and summarized in a 31-page report, documented the full scope of what the black phone contained, including evidence that the behavior had extended beyond our household and beyond Lucia, findings that expanded the scope of the investigation in ways I will not detail here, because they belong to other women's accounts, not mine. Esteban's attorney entered a not guilty plea at arraignment. The plea lasted 4 weeks. When the full forensic report was submitted to the prosecution as discovery, the defense attorney, a man named Gerald Park who had taken the case with a confidence that visibly diminished over the following month, reached out to Patricia Vega about a resolution. Esteban pled guilty to 2 counts of voyeurism and 1 count of criminal stalking. He was sentenced to 22 months, a 10-year restraining order covering all named parties, mandatory registration, and mandatory counseling. Judge Delgado, in her sentencing remarks, said that the pattern of behavior documented in the forensic report demonstrated a calculated, sustained, and predatory course of conduct that warranted the full recommended sentence. I was in the courtroom for the sentencing. So was Lucia. So was Tomas. So was my mother, who sat in the second row and looked at the man she'd liked at her dinner table for 6 years with the expression she uses when she has made a final decision. When it was done, in the hallway outside the courtroom, Lucia and I stood next to each other for a moment without speaking. Then she said, "I should have told you sooner. You found a way to tell me," I said, "when you were ready." She looked at the courthouse floor. "You thought I wanted your husband." "I did," I said. "I'm sorry for that." "You let me in anyway," she said, "every night, even when you were angry." I thought about that, about all 17 nights, about the resentment I'd carried and the door I'd opened anyway, about the one night I'd rehearsed asking her to leave and hadn't because something in her face had stopped me. "Something in you knew," Lucia said. "I don't know if that's true." I know that I was wrong about almost everything. Wrong about what she was doing in my room. Wrong about what she wanted. Wrong about the man beside me in the dark. But something made me open the door. 17 times. Something made me open the door. Tomas and Lucia moved into their own apartment 3 months after the sentencing. 2 bedrooms, 3rd floor of a building with a doorman and a working deadbolt, in a neighborhood Lucia chose specifically because she liked the coffee shop on the corner. She texted me a photo of it the first morning. The window table, the light coming through, a cappuccino she'd made friends with the barista to get right. "Our neighborhood," she texted. I have her number saved in my phone as something I won't share here because some names belong to the people they describe. What I will tell you is this. She didn't come into my room every night because she wanted what was in my bed. She came because a monster was standing right outside hers, and the only thing standing between her and him was a door I kept opening. That's the version of the story I carry now. Not the resentment, not the 17 nights of getting it wrong, just the door, just the fact that I opened it. Some things you get right without knowing why. I think that's enough.